Dinner is done, the plates are cleared, and you have exactly 20 minutes before life pulls you somewhere else. So you lace up your shoes, step outside, and start walking. No sweat dripping down your back, no burning lungs, no dramatic effort, just you, the pavement, and the quiet rhythm of your feet. Now imagine a different evening where you give yourself 40 minutes instead. From the outside, both choices look almost identical: same shoes, same street, same unhurried pace. But inside your body, something very different is about to happen. Most people assume the difference between a 20-minute walk and a 40-minute walk is simple math: twice the time, twice the calories. That assumption sounds logical, but it completely misses what visceral fat is actually waiting for. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most fitness advice never tells you. Visceral fat doesn't behave like a fuel tank that empties when you move. It behaves like a vault with its own security system, one that only opens under very specific conditions. And time is one of the most important keys. Before we go further, let's make sure we're talking about the right fat. Visceral fat isn't the kind you can pinch between your fingers. It sits deep inside your abdomen, wrapping around your liver, kidneys, and other vital organs. It's metabolically active, hormonally sensitive, and strongly linked to insulin resistance, cardiovascular risk, and chronic inflammation, even in people who don't appear overweight on the outside. This is fat that your body treats as a strategic reserve, not a casual energy source. And because it's positioned so close to your most critical organs, it responds quickly and cautiously to everything: blood sugar shifts, stress hormones, nervous system signals. It doesn't release energy easily. It watches, waits, and evaluates before it decides to cooperate. Now here's the question most people never think to ask. What exactly is visceral fat waiting to see before it agrees to release stored energy? The answer isn't intensity. The answer isn't willpower. The answer is duration and the biological environment that sustained movement creates over time. To understand why, we need to step inside the body the moment your walk begins. The first thing that happens when you start moving has nothing to do with burning fat. Your muscles send a quiet signal to your heart: we need a little more oxygen now. Nothing urgent, just adjust. Your heart responds by beating slightly faster and pushing blood through your system with a bit more force. This increased blood flow brushes against the inner walls of your blood vessels, a thin, living layer called the endothelium. That friction matters more than most people realize. In response to sustained blood flow, the endothelium releases nitric oxide, a natural signaling molecule that tells blood vessels to relax and open wider. Vascular resistance drops. Circulation becomes smoother and more efficient. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard to move blood through the system. And all of this happens in the first few minutes of walking, before you've burned a single calorie of stored fat. This early phase is preparation, not release. Your body is reducing internal friction, improving the delivery network, and beginning to ask a very important question: is this movement temporary, or is it the beginning of something sustained? Visceral fat is listening to that question very carefully. As you move into the 3 to 10 minute range, a second layer of change begins. Your breathing deepens without you consciously trying to make it happen. Inhales become fuller, exhales become more complete, and this rhythmic pattern feeds directly back into your nervous system. Deep, steady breathing is one of the most powerful natural signals that your body is safe, not threatened, not in danger, not in crisis. Stress signals begin to soften their grip. Cortisol, the hormone most closely tied to visceral fat retention, starts to ease slightly. Blood sugar handling improves as muscles begin taking up glucose more efficiently, reducing the need for aggressive insulin spikes. The internal environment is shifting slowly, quietly, but meaningfully. And visceral fat notices every single change. By the time you reach the 20-minute mark, something real has happened inside your body. Circulation is better, stress signals are softer, vascular resistance has dropped, and glucose is being handled more efficiently. From a general health standpoint, this is genuinely valuable. But here's what the research reveals, and this is the part that surprises most people. For many adults, especially those dealing with chronic stress, insulin resistance, or long periods of daily sitting, 20 minutes may not be long enough for visceral fat to feel convinced. The body has improved the environment, but it hasn't held that environment long enough to feel safe letting go. Think of it this way. Visceral fat at the 20-minute mark is like a cautious investor who has heard a promising pitch but hasn't seen enough evidence to commit. The conditions are improving, but the signal hasn't been sustained long enough to feel like a pattern. The body is saying, "I'm listening, but I'm not convinced yet." This is why so many people walk faithfully every day for 20 minutes, do everything right on the surface, and still see almost no change in their belly fat. It's not a failure of effort. It's a matter of biological timing. Now let's follow what happens when you keep walking past that 20-minute mark. Between 20 and 30 minutes, something important shifts in the hormonal environment. Cortisol, which tends to stay elevated when the body senses uncertainty or incomplete signals, begins to fall more decisively. Insulin patterns stabilize rather than fluctuating reactively. Blood flow remains elevated and consistent, not surging, not dropping, just steady. The nervous system, which has now spent nearly half an hour in a low-threat, well-regulated state, begins to lower its guard. And visceral fat cells, sensing this increasingly stable environment, start to respond differently. The warehouse doors, which were cracked open at 20 minutes, begin to open more fully. Fatty acids start moving more freely into circulation to support ongoing movement. The body begins drawing more fuel from stored sources rather than relying exclusively on circulating blood sugar. This isn't something you feel as a sudden rush of energy. It's a quiet, physiological shift in how your body is sourcing fuel, and it only happens because you stayed long enough for the message to land. As you approach 40 minutes, your body is no longer evaluating whether to cooperate. It has already decided. The biological environment has been held long enough, consistently enough, that visceral fat receives a clear and unambiguous signal: energy is being used in a safe, controlled, sustainable way. This is the threshold most people never cross because they stop just before they reach it. 40 minutes doesn't mean you worked twice as hard as someone who walked 20 minutes. It means your body received a fundamentally different message, not that movement is happening, but that movement is safe to sustain. That distinction is everything when it comes to visceral fat. Now, when you walk matters almost as much as how long you walk. One of the most underused windows for visceral fat signaling is the walk after a meal. After eating, blood sugar rises, insulin increases, and your body enters a storage-focused state. Visceral fat interprets this environment as a reason to stay protective. Energy has arrived, hold tight, don't release anything. Sitting down after eating reinforces that message with every passing minute. A 20-minute post-meal walk can help redirect blood flow toward working muscles and smooth out glucose spikes, and that's genuinely useful. But a 40-minute walk after a meal extends that beneficial window long enough for insulin levels to fully settle, muscles to continue absorbing incoming fuel, and the storage signal to visceral fat to quiet down rather than just pause. Over weeks and months, this cumulative shift changes how your body defaults to handling energy. The same principle applies after stress. When cortisol rises during a difficult workday, an argument, or even a frustrating commute, your body is chemically instructed to keep energy stored close to vital organs. Sitting still while that cortisol lingers allows the signal to repeat itself on a loop. A short walk can interrupt that cycle. A longer walk gives your nervous system enough uninterrupted time to fully step down from alert mode. Cortisol drops more completely, and your body receives a clear signal that the threat has passed. This is why people often notice that walks after stressful evenings feel qualitatively different from morning walks. It's not just psychological relief, it's a measurable physiological reset. There's also something important to understand about pace. You don't need to walk fast for any of this to work. In fact, walking too intensely can counteract the effect. Stress hormones can rise again if the exertion feels threatening to the body, which sends exactly the wrong signal to visceral fat. The goal is a pace that's steady and slightly brisk, enough to sustain elevated blood flow without triggering a stress response. Comfortable but not casual, a rhythm your body can trust. Over weeks of repeating this pattern, something deeper begins to change. Your cardiovascular system becomes more efficient at maintaining smooth blood flow. Your blood vessels develop a stronger tendency to stay flexible rather than stiff. Hormonal responses to everyday stress become less exaggerated. Visceral fat, no longer receiving constant signals to stay on guard, gradually loses its biological reason to remain tightly stored. This is the cumulative effect that most people miss when they evaluate walking purely by calories burned per session. They're measuring the wrong thing. The real benefit of a 40-minute walk isn't the calories in that single session. It's the repeated message sent to a deeply cautious biological system again and again that safety is real, that energy demand is manageable, that it's finally okay to let go. Clinicians who track these outcomes don't just look at the scale. They see waist measurements slowly shrinking, fasting insulin levels improving, resting blood pressure becoming more stable, and patients reporting that they feel less reactive, less inflamed, more resilient in daily life. These are signs of a metabolic environment that is genuinely changing, not just a calorie deficit. And they appear consistently in people who extend their walks, not in people who simply walk faster. One final thing before we close this out. Walking is one of the safest forms of movement available to almost anyone. But if you experience chest discomfort, unusual dizziness, shortness of breath that seems disproportionate to your effort, or if you're managing heart disease, uncontrolled blood pressure, or recovering from surgery, please get guidance from your doctor before making changes. The goal is never to push through warning signs. The goal is to build a pattern gentle enough that your body adapts safely, consistently, and willingly. We started this with a simple image: 2 evenings, 2 walks, the same shoes on the same pavement. Now you understand why those 2 walks are not the same thing at all. 20 minutes begins the conversation. 40 minutes changes the outcome. Not because of effort, not because of discipline, but because visceral fat is a biological system that responds to sustained signals, and 40 minutes is long enough to finally send the right one. Your body adapts to what you repeatedly ask it to do. When you ask for calm, steady, sustained movement long enough, often enough, visceral fat eventually stops holding on. It doesn't need to be forced. It just needs to feel safe.